My life is consecrated on the great experiment. I tell you, I shall prove your kinship with the ape by mixing Eric's blood with the blood of man. Heresy! Heresy! Do they still burn people for heresy? Burn me, monsieur. Light the fire. Hi, I'm Bobby, and welcome to Dusty Old Movies. As a fan of Universal Horror, I had heard about Murders in the Rue Morgue years ago. But because it's off the main drag, not a Frankenstein or Dracula, it was hard to find. Then, it finally came out as part of the Bela Lugosi DVD collection. It wasn't what I was expecting, but I found it nonetheless to be a wonderfully macabre third entry in the Universal Horror cycle. In 1841, American horror writer Edgar Allan Poe published his short story, Murders in the Rue Morgue. It focused on two men living in Paris, the eccentric Dupin and his roommate, the unnamed narrator. After reading about a murder in the newspaper, Dupin offers his help to the police and uses his intellect to deduce that the murderer is an orangutan. For those wondering, this story came out before Sherlock Holmes. Wikipedia, my dear Watson. It is considered the first modern detective story, and in 1931, it was the perfect vehicle for the new horror star, Bela Lugosi. Bela Lugosi had just taken a huge bite out of the box office in Universal's Dracula, and to capitalize on his spooky success, Universal planned for him to star in two other classic horror stories, Frankenstein and then Murders in the Rue Morgue. The French-American Robert Florey had written a script for Frankenstein and was set to direct. And although Bela had hoped to play Dr. Frankenstein, he was set to play the monster. The two men, along with several other actors, filmed a makeup test where they performed the creation scene. Although there has been speculation, because this test has been lost, Bela Lugosi's monster makeup remains a mystery. However Bela looked, studio manager Carl Laemmle Jr. laughed when he saw the test. There is no existing paperwork that says why, but Robert Florey was dropped from the project and replaced by James Whale. Bela Lugosi claimed that he turned down the film, and that he even personally found his replacement, Boris Karloff. Even I don't believe that. While some film historians suggest that he was dropped from the project as well. Whatever happened, both men were given Murders in the Rue Morgue as a consolation prize. Coming after Dracula, and starting just 16 days after Frankenstein wrapped, this was a much cheaper production, but it was still the third entry in the mighty legacy of Universal horror films. Pierre Dupin, his fiancée Camille, his comedy relief friend Paul, and Paul's sweetheart are at a carnival, where they see Dr. Miracle and his ape Eric. Dr. Miracle claims that he can communicate with Eric, and he explains the theory of evolution, that mankind is descended from the ape, and he intends to prove it by mixing the blood of humans with the blood of his ape. When he sees Camille, Dr. Miracle and Eric think that she will be the perfect choice. After killing a few rejects, Dr. Miracle and Eric kidnap Camille for their experiment. Meanwhile, Pierre Dupin, who as a medical student has been analyzing the dead women, tries to solve the mystery. Despite coming out in 1932. Holy dentures, Batman! Certain aspects of this film remain terrifying and provocative, while others make it seem every bit of 84 years old. The film focuses on Darwin's theory of evolution. Now, just 7 years prior to this, the Scopes monkey trial occurred, where a teacher was famously put on trial for teaching evolution in class. So it was a hot issue then, and in some cases, it's still a hot issue. To prove Darwin's theory, Miracle plans to mix the blood of humans with the blood of his ape, and ultimately force them into bestiality. Yes, Miracle has gone bananas. Did you hear what Dr. Miracle said? Has it occurred to you that he might be right? Oh, eat your lunch, Dupin! It's so daring and so creepy. Firstly because, in a twisted way, Miracle's plan does make sense. Forcing a woman and the ape to mate could potentially produce some evidence about evolution. Secondly, because the bestiality is just implied, it's left in your imagination. But Bela Lugosi is so intense about it that you know he'll go through with it. It's incredibly frightening, especially in the scene where you hear Eric getting excited in his cage. While the horror scenes work well, when the plot switches back to the romance of Pierre and Camille and his investigation, the story becomes more bland, so they liven it up with comedy relief. While James Whale was using a darker and more impish style of comedy in Frankenstein, Flores is more old-fashioned and hokey. Pierre has a fat, sissy comedy relief sidekick. There are cultural misunderstandings, and a little bit of old-fashioned sexual innuendo. Do they bite? Oh yes, but you'll have to pay extra for that. Some of the jokes are hits, and some are misses. Now, on one hand, it does give the non-Lugosi scenes more entertainment value, so I'm glad for it. But the humor is so corny that it feels disconnected to the darkness of the Morocco plot, which, incidentally, proves to be a great showcase for Bela Lugosi.
By the light of the silvery moon, I want to spoon to my honey, I'll croon love tune.
This is the only time where Universal Studios thought that Bela Lugosi would be their big horror star, and when they created the character of Dr. Morocco, who is not in the short story, they came up with the perfect role for him. When we first meet him, he's performing his sideshow act where he speaks with Eric the Ape. He looks out of this world with his hair and unibrow. He's charismatic, intense, and his natural theatricality is put to perfect use. I especially love Pierre and Camille's reaction to him. What a funny looking man! He's a show in himself! Did you notice his accent? I wonder where he comes from. I've never heard an accent like it. It adds to the mystery and strangeness of Dr. Morocco and of Bela Lugosi, who is still new to audiences. After the show, Dr. Morocco combs the streets of Paris, where he finds a frightened prostitute, whom he brings back to his lab. A lady in distress. Who are you? Come with me. No one could deliver a scary line like Bela. There's the evil force of nature behind it. Then, once he begins experimenting on her, he becomes even more of an animal than Eric is. Rotten blood! Your blood is rotten! Black is your sins! You cheated me! Your beauty was a lie! Dead. You're dead. That one moment humanizes this fabulously evil mad scientist. Along with Morocco, I also go ape for Eric, who, as we know from Dr. Morocco's translation, just wants some love. My home is in the African jungle, where I lived with my father and mother. I'm in the prime of my strength. And I'm lonely. The somewhat fleshed out and slightly sympathetic Eric is played by Charles Gamora. Gamora specialized in playing apes in Hollywood, in his own cut-above ape suits, which he made himself. In fact, he was known as King of the Gorilla Men. Most of the shots of him are from the back, and some are just of his shadow, which helps make him intimidating and believable. However, after the fabulous Frankenstein premiere, Universal did some last-minute monkeying around and pumped extra money into Rue Morgue and ordered shots of a real chimpanzee from the zoo for the close-ups of Eric. Gamora was as mad as a gorilla. This whale I review Planet of the Apes, they'll really go bananas. And I understand it, because his ape suits were really well done, and they did have facial mobility. However, from a modern standpoint, a man in an ape suit does feel kind of Three Stooges, so I think the real chimpanzee gives it more of a realism and gives it more of a real ape personality. Unfortunately, the chimpanzee looks nothing like Gamora's suit, so the idea isn't executed very well. The rest of the cast is a mixed bag. I like Pierre, but the leading lady Camille is played by Sydney Fox, who was dating studio manager Carl Laemmle Jr., and when you see her acting, it shows. I don't know if I should be blaming her or Flory, but she acts like a cartoon, and it hurts the film because it makes it hard to care when she's in danger. Incidentally, her relationship with Carl Laemmle Jr. is why she has top billing. What the heck? While the cast varies, the atmosphere is spot on. The scary atmosphere of Murders in the Rue Morgue is incredibly strong and captivating. The story opens at a carnival sideshow, so you're immediately thrown into a bizarre world. And the director, Robert Florey, is a master of using the style of German expressionism throughout the film. The buildings are all weirdly shaped, the sets are creepy, there's exquisite use of light and dark, and frightening images of shadows. It'll make you never want to go to Paris. It's like watching a nightmare, and it is the perfect setting for the evil on-screen persona of Bela Lugosi. Despite putting extra money into it and reshoots, Murders in the Rue Morgue was a box office disappointment. In contrast, the original Florey and Lugosi project Frankenstein was a monster hit. Universal chose to not renew Robert Florey's or Bela Lugosi's contract at the studio. Instead, Universal put their attention into building up their even newer horror star, Boris Karloff. After a 2-year hiatus, Bela Lugosi would return to work for Universal, but he was typically playing secondary roles, underneath Boris Karloff and later Lon Chaney Jr. Charles Gamora continued to have a great career playing apes, and even played the ape in the Murders in the Rue Morgue remake, Phantom of the Rue Morgue. Sidney Fox would soon break up with Junior Lumley. She would go on to have a troubled marriage and died in 1942 of an overdose of sleeping pills. Of the two, Frankenstein is the better film. It has a stronger story, and it deserved to be the bigger hit. But Murders in the Rue Morgue is still pretty good. And although there are flaws, some aspects are absolutely captivating. I wouldn't trade the James Whale and Boris Karloff Frankenstein for anything. But based on this film, I would love to see what Florey and Lugosi would have done with it, especially if Lugosi played Dr. Frankenstein. So I give Murders in the Rue Morgue 3 unibrows out of 4. Thank you for watching Dusty Old Movies, and have a beastly beautiful day.